this is directly going to affect your ability to invest in those things as freely as you once were. So contact your representatives, look up and see who, at least in your state or at least around the country, is even up for re-election, and try to, inform them, not just Republicans, but inform Democrats. Because I guarantee you there are Democrats out there that don't realize the consequences of some of this stuff as well. Even though it may be Democratic legislation, we need to write any and every lawmaker you can think of that might be beneficial to this to bring attention. And I hope being on platforms like this helps. If you have any questions, I'm always here to answer any of those. I'm sure Vinney will have my contact information and the recording when it gets pushed out. I'm always happy to help and answer questions, and let you know what we know, and try to help you be an informed and responsible investor.
Welcome to the Investor Financing Podcast, where we interview real estate investors and lenders so you can learn all the secrets to getting your projects funded and scale your portfolio. And now, your host, Beau Eckstein.
How are you doing, Beau? Yeah, bud.
I'm doing well. I'm in my new office. I expanded my home office, and I took 2 bedrooms and demoed the wall in between. So now I am fully functioning at the house. Much bigger space. Got a standing desk. I'm, like everybody should have a standing desk. If you're sitting in front of your desk all day, you should be standing.
Hey, let me introduce our guest. Alex Perney's in the house, and Alex is a 10-year veteran of the self-directed IRA. 10 years in the industry, and there are few alternative assets that he has not had the hand in structuring within IRA. The good thing is the checkbook control, and he's worked with over 1,200 different deals ranging from single-family homes, multifamily partnerships, private securities, and mortgage lending, working to help clients realize their goals of true diversity within their retirement portfolios. So continues to drive Alex to discover new ways to invest for his clients. Welcome, Alex.
Sure, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm kind of a bit mired in this legislative things that are going on right now, but it's important work that needs to be done in getting this message out here to help people understand exactly what's going on. I think people have, over the past several years have gotten a little bit numb to legislative proposals and things that are getting passed. So it's important that although, we might get a little bit burned out on it, we understand what's happening out there, because this is the time that stuff that people don't agree with gets passed when you just don't look at it, don't fight it, don't write your representatives and things like that. So thanks for having me on to talk today.
No, totally. Could you give us the perspective, like what's happening in the new administration, this January?
Sure.
A lot of things are rolling back and a lot of turmoil is going on. I mean, we just covered, we're going to go bankrupt. I think we just extended the limit. It's just ridiculous.
So there's a lot of stuff going on, and to kind of give people the, TLDR of it. Yesterday, we had Biden signing in to effect a rise in the debt limit that we can have, so we can borrow money essentially to pay our treasury bills and our outstanding debt. So that has been, kind of the crisis that people have been hearing about of us, the U.S. defaulting on stuff like that. It's passed. And in reality, that's more of kind of brinksmanship between Republicans and Democrats. That stuff always typically, is the 11th hour getting done. So that's done. Now what we're looking at is we have an infrastructure bill and we have a spending and reconciliation bill. 2 separate items. So they're billed at almost $4.5 trillion combined between the two. We have about $1 trillion in infrastructure spending, which has a lot of back and forth with Democrats and Republicans on passage of that. But the really important part is the reconciliation bill. Now, a lot of people might not really be familiar with what that is. Essentially, it is a spending bill, a proposed budgetary bill, where so long as there are certain rules abided by, so there's not a substantial change to Social Security, there's not a net increase in spending, so the bill has to raise as much money as it's proposing to spend. But ironically, it's only projected to be able to cover that expenditure for 10 years. And then after that, they're quoting as saying that the markets will shift enough to pay for itself after that. So it's kind of a little wonky. But essentially, at the end of the day, they don't need an overwhelming majority to pass a reconciliation bill. You can do it once per year, but you only need 50 votes in the Senate to pass that bill along, as opposed to 60 votes of a majority for passing other things. So it's a little frightening for the fact that some of the stuff that's tacked in here has a real chance of getting passed through if there's not some real pushback from taxpayers, from people writing the representatives. There's a lot of stuff packed into this spending bill that really is more kind of special interest to certain representatives and senators that have been put into this. And the parts that are really concerning, at least with us, are some stuff with regard to retirement plan assets and how IRAs are administered. Now, people have kind of heard that, hey, they're going to cap and say, you can't get more than $10 million into an IRA. And I think most people, although, personally, I'm not a fan of the government telling you how much money you can make or earn, most people can probably get behind, if you have $10 million in an IRA tax shelter, maybe you don't need any more in there. So, okay, I think that's kind of the most palatable of all of them. Not ideal, but, we can live with that. The other parts, though, are changes to longstanding rules with regards to Roth conversions. So having a cap on the amount of income you can earn and still do a Roth conversion. So individuals that still want to contribute money to a Roth IRA but are phased out of the income limitation for the backdoor IRA, they're going after that. You make over $400,000 as an individual or $425,000 as a married household, you can no longer do that or do conversions of any kind. Which, if you're living in middle America, yeah, you're making a lot of money if you're pulling in $450,000 a year. If you live in Manhattan, the San Francisco Bay Area, you're not considerably a super wealthy individual. So it's, it's a bit broad reaching in that respect. So, it's kind of getting down to some of the more concerning stuff. It's okay, the Roth conversion stuff goes away. Then there also, the really concerning part is section 138.312, which is a fundamental change in the way that people raise capital. So for people like you, Vinney, if you have a Reg D offering or something where you're soliciting investors that are accredited, most people, if they're accredited, will say, hey, if I want to use my IRA, okay, great, I can, because my accreditation standard extends to my IRA. So I can say, hey, instead of me investing personally in this limited partnership for one of your, let's say a multifamily deal or an assisted living facility, I'm going to use my IRA and take advantage of that tax status. Instead of investing in the market, and buying traditional stocks and bonds, I'm going to invest in some type of alternative, which, I think everyone should be able that can do alternatives should have that option to do it. Now, currently, really the only restriction on what you can buy in an IRA is you can't buy collectibles and you can't buy life insurance. But what they're going to do now is essentially say any type of private investment, so something that's not publicly traded, but something that's a security, so private LLC membership, private limited partnership interest, private beneficial interest in trust, would not be allowed to be held by an IRA. And more concerning with that is that, again, we just kind of have the Ways and Means Committee spitting out a general proposal, but they say that you'd have to divest that in 2 years. And that's kind of the, well, then what does that mean? In working in the world of limited partnerships, these things can be highly illiquid for several years. And they might even have restriction covenants built in to the subscription and the private placement memorandums that say, hey, you can't sell this. So then, it's one of those things that is mind boggling, one on saying, hey, you're going to restrict these people from investing in this, but then telling them they have 2 years to divest. It just kind of causes just a cascading effect of things, at least in our industry, where we're saying, well, how do we do that? Is a client going to be under the burden to take a distribution from this IRA? If you invested $250,000 into a syndication, do you have to take that as taxable now and pay penalties on it? It's frightening in it's frightening in its context, but it's even more frightening in its brevity of saying, hey, they don't give any context to how this stuff's supposed to work. They're just going to throw it at the wall and kind of, let it fall where it may. So that's really the big substantial issue that I'm seeing right now. And, we're recommending people get out there and contact your
senators and
your representatives.
Yep.
And not, I would say even go past that. Contact people that are up for re-election. In my district, a gentleman named Charlie Crist is my representative. He's a former governor of the state of Florida, and he's running for governor again. So, hopefully he's listening to his constituency. They're going to be voting for him into a new position. I've written him, but you gotta bring this stuff up to these representatives, because this stuff is buried in a $3.5 trillion bill. This is footnote stuff, and it's proposed, and the thing that really kind of is troublesome is that this proposed part of the legislation, out of $3.5 trillion roughly of spending, is proposed to raise about $2 billion.
That's it?
2.
Oh my gosh. After
so
doing
it's not, it's not like they have a huge amount of cash that's proposed to be raised by this. It's frightening. It really is, and it puts a big target on what we do and how we help clients. So that's
with
kind of the proposal,
right? It's with like Pensco's and the Equity Trust and IRA Trust and Advanta yourself and other people too, right? So how much money I think somewhere I read that 34 trillion is in retirement funds, but how much of that is in the real estate, one thing, in the REITs and all that, and then how much of that is into private equity funds like ours? Is there any number on that?
Are you looking for capital for your business? Whether you need to get new equipment, finance your accounts receivable, raise working capital, or acquire commercial real estate, SBA Exchange can help you get approved and funded. SBA programs can also fund ground-up construction projects. The process is simple, and the initial consultation is free. Simply book a call. An advisor will call you at your desired time. We have built relationships with the top SBA lenders. We know their lending appetite. We will source and connect you with the appropriate lender. You will not waste time trying to figure out who to apply with and how to get started, and follow the process through to completion. We have streamlined the lending process from A to Z and work with you on all forms and documents to expedite your loan approval. SBA Exchange is the marketplace for SBA financing.
So it's hard to guess, but I can give kind of our best estimates because we try to track that information. But we're not going to necessarily provide our holding spreadsheet to one of our competitors or make it public, for that matter. But roughly $27 to $30 trillion in retirement plan assets. Now, what does that cover? That's your pension plans, your 401ks, your IRAs. So it's a big number. It's 4 commas. It's a big one. So distilling that down, what is self-directed? Probably about 4 to 5% of that is truly self-directed, and then from there, I would say it's probably about 33% split between the 3 major categories, between your real estate, your private equities, and then just call it your other general category. So hundreds of billions of dollars probably is probably a relatively accurate estimate of how much is invested in these types of investments. But what they're trying to kind of go after is the Peter Thiels, who have claims he has a $5 billion IRA. I get where they're coming from with that, but again, that's if you look at the bell curve, he's way over in left field. He may have the biggest IRA by a factor of several in the entire nation. So I think it's a little bit premature to kind of go after as extensively as we have this. And they also have changed the statute of limitation proposal on how far back they can go back and test for prohibited transactions, which would imply that they're going to start auditing IRAs more, so that way they have a bigger window to go back instead of 3 to 6 years. So it's frightening stuff, especially for people raising capital. I would highly recommend that the capital raisers take a hard look at this. And if you know anyone that's invested in your fund, that's in politics, local or otherwise, start kind of using that network. People always talk about your network is your net worth. Well, this is the time to tap into that net worth and try to figure out who you can talk to, because I highly doubt that many, if any, actual lawmakers past maybe the ones that actually wrote this portion of the proposed legislation really know that it's in there, or at least if they saw it on face value, would realize how far it affects down the rabbit hole. It's not just affecting people with $10-50 million net worths. This is people with sub-$1 million net worths. This is everyday investors that just want to use an LLC to hold a single family home that's worth $125,000. This is everyone that elects to not be invested in Wall Street, basically. If you want to use your IRAs to do anything outside of Wall Street, this is just, this is kind of a blanket, like a carpet bombing of those type of investing strategies.
So true, so true. Beau, you have some good questions, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, what would the process be to get this voted in or voted out, or when would this all occur potentially?
So it's hard to say. I mean, it could really happen, at any time. I would say just with the back end that we had, that we saw, and I tried to update myself this morning, but the Democrats and Republicans are really kind of sparring with the infrastructure bill right now, which I would say is probably going to be steering the boat as far as what they're looking to vote on first, because I feel like they want to save their reconciliation kind of trump card for this big one, because they could use the reconciliation vote to push through the infrastructure if they wanted to, but they'd burn their one use of that per year, and then they'd have to get 60 votes on the big spending bill. So when would it come up? It could be anywhere. There was news reports at the beginning of the week that it might get voted on yesterday. That didn't happen because of the debt ceiling stuff. So as far as when it might come up, I would say probably in the next 30 to 60 days. I would say news media is probably going to be, maybe talking it up like it's going to come sooner. Just with what I've seen, because we got the proposal out of Ways and Means for all these different statutes on the retirement plan stuff about, I would say probably about 25 days ago, 30 days ago, maybe about a month. So, and they were saying, it's going to get voted immediately because they're using reconciliation, and it hasn't. So, the wheels of government turn slowly. So
can we give an example? Okay, let's just say I had a self-directed IRA and I wanted to invest into one of Vinney's syndications. Okay. Which is I would be investing into an LLC that owns shares in this.
Yep.
So how does that affect me now?
And usually the hold is 5 to 7 years. I was wanting to add that, right, Beau?
So
you're buying this asset, you cannot liquidate overnight. I mean, you cannot do value add. You can't do the whole business plan with it until maybe 3 to 5 to 7 years. So it's a big wrench in the whole scheme, isn't it?
So you only have so how would that apply to me? Because I'm investing into this syndication.
So in that scenario, yeah, absolutely. So in that scenario, you come in, you're invested into this partnership. However you structure it, whether, like you said, you do like a front end LLC or you just subscribe to the partnership. Essentially, it would say that starting in let's say it passes this year, so it gets written into law next year. So let's say from 2022, you would have to remove that asset from your IRA. So, and unfortunately, I'll read exactly what it is from the proposal of Ways and Means. It says, furthermore, this section generally takes effect for tax years beginning after December 31st of 2021. But there is a 2-year transition period for IRAs already invested in these investments. So if you were to execute that investment this year, and again, I'm reading directly from what they put out, it would be indicated that you have to have that removed from your IRA. So does the investment provider then have to bring in new capital to replace you? Do you then in turn have to take it as a distribution? Do you, is there going to be some type of removal of the restriction covenant where you could sell that investment to someone else? We don't know, but it's frightening for the fact that it causes so many unknowns and none of them are an easy path forward.
So, but so if the law passes, then essentially I wouldn't be able to invest into a private LLC.
If you hadn't already done so, correct?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So then, what about could I still do like buy a house?
Yeah.
In the name of my IRA, not into an LLC.
Correct. Yeah. So you would still, as far as we know, again, this is
hypothetical.
This is very thin on what we have so far. But yeah, you could still buy a piece of property. That wouldn't be affected. But your effect on how you'd like to do that certainly would. Buying a single family home is an easy enough proposition for an IRA investor. Let's say you had an old 401k that has $250 in it. You find a house for $180. You buy it in the IRA. Straightforward. But let's say you had a smaller IRA, or you wanted to buy like a fourplex or a small apartment complex, and you needed to bring investors together. Well, then you're going to put all 4 of those investors on one deed as a tenant in common. It just really makes the flexibility of the ability to invest in real estate really hard because, a syndication, as fancy as it might seem to some people, at the end of the day, you're investing in the building, the cash flow. It's not anything as exotic as investing in like a limited partnership that trades weird securities on Malta or some sort of tax haven country. It's fairly straightforward. You're investing in real estate and the performance of it. So,
so basically, it sounds like they're trying to control. It's a control thing. That you can only invest in these vehicles. And
the REITs on the Wall Street and
right.
I mean, what will be other ways? The only thing you could do then is REITs. Are there some other vehicles of real estate?
Well, I mean, you could. Well, I would say even REITs. If you're investing in uncapitalized, non-publicly traded REITs, this would apply to that as well.
Yes.
In my estimation.
Yeah.
You can only invest in publicly traded REITs at that point. So again, this. I hope the people at places like Blackstone and people are reading this because it could certainly affect their abilities if they sponsor a private REIT that's uncapitalized too. So,
big time. So true.
It's definitely a big control move to get things just
And is it to only make? I mean, one of the reason also is many times government is looking at increasing taxation. They want money, right, to take care of loans and debts and all that stuff. So 2 billion, you brought a number only 2 billion out of trillions of dollars being spent. This going to bring only 2 billion taxes. Is that right?
That's the proposal of what this will actually raise. And again, it's kind of hard to say where the retirement plan ones will actually raise it because most of these things are just restrictions on what you can and can't do. The part about the overage on $10 million IRAs is saying that you can't accumulate any more value or capital in there, so you'd have to distribute it at that point. So that would be a revenue generator there. There's not anything implicitly stating here that any of this other stuff would do anything other than just, restrict your options. Just saying, hey, you can't invest in private, investments anymore. Well, that doesn't raise taxable revenue. That just, kind of kneecaps your ability to invest in something. So again, this is more regulatory stuff than it is kind of a reconciliation of balance of spending and budget increase.
I really want to say thank you to everybody who's watching us and listening to us. We come live to you every Friday, 9:30, Vinney and Beau show. Please let us know where you're from, and if you have some questions for our guests or us, please put it in the chat also. We come live in YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook pages, Facebook all over. So please like us, comment, and share this live show. And then we also make podcasts of this too. No, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on the show. Any last comments you would like to tell the investors or watchers to do? Yeah.
I would just encourage people to, just make sure I know politics can be a little bit draining, but you just have to, you have to stay on top of this stuff. Don't let things that are going to affect people just get pushed in because, there's burnout on hearing this stuff. Take this stuff to heart because if this stuff becomes law, it's going to directly affect not only just, the people with billion-dollar IRAs, but it's, the heart and soul of the middle America and everyone that could be affected by this. Just the amount of option that you have. If you don't want to invest in Wall Street, which is probably the people, everyone listening to this podcast, they like alternatives, they like tangible assets, real estate, different things. This is directly going to affect your ability to invest in those things as freely as you once were. So contact your representatives, look up and see who, at least in your state or at least around the country, is even up for re-election and try to, inform them, not just Republicans, but inform Democrats. Because I guarantee you there are Democrats out there that don't realize the consequences of some of this stuff as well. Even though it may be Democratic legislation, we need to write any and every lawmaker you can think of that might be beneficial to this to bring attention. And I hope being on platforms like this helps. If you have any questions, I'm always here to answer any of those. I'm sure Vinney will have my contact information and the recording when it gets pushed out. I am always happy to help and answer questions and let you know what we know and try to help you be an informed and responsible investor.
Thank you so much, Alex, brother. I appreciate that. And if we can be of any help to anybody, please reach out to us. And God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Vinney, John, and Beau.